Good afternoon, everyone. We are currently live. We're going to go ahead and take our roll for our programs committee meeting for today. Chair Andronika Morris. Ms. Giselle Johnson Banks. Present. Mr. Steve Smith. We currently do not have a quorum.
All right, we don't have a quorum. We went through informational purposes, only a report, and we will now close the meeting.
We are now entering our Board of Trustees meeting. We'll take a roll call. Chair Edgar Chase IV.
Present.
Vice Chair Andronika Morris. Secretary Treasurer G. Wade Wooten.
Present.
Board Member Giselle Johnson Banks.
Present.
Board Member John Malazio Jr.
Present.
Board Member Stephen Smith. Board Member Hunter Thomas. A quorum is present.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the consent agenda items. That's going to be the approval of the September 12th Board of Trustee meeting minutes, as well as the September 26th Board of Trustee meeting minutes and the October 19th, 2022 Board Retreat meeting minutes. And I'll give you all a time to review. After that, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move approval. I have a move approval of the minutes.
I'll second. Been moved and properly second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And none. Moving forward to, there's no new business, so we'll.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
so you do have an item that needs to be amended to the agenda for the board. We did have a presentation and programs that we had to defer because of the forum. So we would recommend that you request a motion to amend the agenda.
And work with it.
And that is for the REO
Discussion.
Yeah. What was
Wrong bills.
Wrong village.
Wrong, and that's going under new business?
Yeah,
Okay,
so you would ask for a motion.
so let's, can I get a motion to amend the agenda to add an item of the Barone Villa to new business?
I move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. So we've added that to new business, and now that is up.
Okay, thank you, board members. Today, I'd like to present to you the Barone Villas project, which is being sponsored by REO LLC, led by Mr. Stephen Kennedy, who's here in attendance with us today. So I'll talk a little bit about the details of the project and invite Mr. Kennedy to come up afterwards to say a few words and answer any questions that the board might have. So before I get into the ins and outs of this project, I'd like to say that this is one of the 4 projects that I mentioned earlier in the programs committee, which would bring us to 10 deals on the year once we're able to close it. But what's significant about this project is that it's the 3rd of all the projects that we've done that is led by a DBE developer. And this one is unique because it's 100% led by a DBE developer. The other ones have been partnerships of different varieties. So this is really important to our mission. The developer has been working on this project for a few years, a number of years. So a lot of blood, sweat, and tears has gone into it. And it's an example of ways for us to do infill development in our community. I've been out to the site. I've seen it. I've had a chance to walk it with the developer and some other potential investors. And it would be a really good improvement impact for that community, for the Central City community. So, you know, this deal has a soul to it, which is what I'm trying to say here, and I'll get into the numbers. But it's really important that we continue to encourage projects like this and that we continue to support these projects in different ways. So this project has two requests, which is going to be something different that you'll see today as well. First off, there's a pilot request, and it's the standard 40-year pilot that we've been doing for affordable housing projects. But then there's also a request for credit enhancement to support the bond issue. So the bonds are being issued through the Louisiana Housing Corporation. And we're still providing the pilot, of course, but the developer, being an emerging developer, the requirements to do low-income housing tax credit / bond deals are pretty high. But then you compare that to the fact that a developer can go out, get land, get vouchers, get capital, get everything that is needed in order to have a successful project. But the requirements, some of the liquidity requirements can be problematic. And that's something that we identified a few years back, and we wanted to provide some kind of support. So this is the first project where we're asking the board to provide credit support. And that credit support will be in the form of a pledge agreement with the bank that's going to end up buying these bonds in the amount of 10% of the bond issue. So this bond issue, which it's hard to see on this particular graph, but the bond issue that was approved by the State Bond Commission last week was $5.5 million. So that means a $550,000 allocation of capital from Finance New Orleans to the project. What that would do is give the lender enough comfort to purchase the bonds. And what it would also do is allow that developer to get into the market, maintain most of the developer fees, and control of the project. And also we would only be supporting the project through construction. So these bonds tend to be anywhere from 15 to 30 years. But the idea is that we need to help projects through the riskier part of the scenario, which is the construction phase. So the total project cost is about $9.5 million. It will include low-income housing tax credit equity, funding from the city of New Orleans, funding from HANO, bonds from LHC. And as you can see in this funding chart here, these are the permanent sources of funding. So the bond amount is $1 million as opposed to the $5.5 million that I just mentioned. But a lot of the money you see on this chart will flow in post-construction to pay off the bond issue. And that'll happen a lot in some of these low-income housing tax credit deals. The pilot savings over the next 15-year period, the present value of those savings are $82,000. And then the credit enhancement amount would be $550,000, which those two line items are not necessarily a part of the funding sources because we're a backstop funding source in this particular case. So our money is there on reserve to help over collateralize the project. Now, as you can see, the city's already put up a substantial amount of money in this project. And when I say city, I mean city and all of its agencies. And that's been the necessary thing to do over the last few years because of cost, because of insurance, interest, et cetera. There just not being enough allocation of private funding for these projects. Either the city invests in it or it doesn't happen at all. So over time, we want to make this more efficient, but this deal has been de-risked quite a bit by the city and has strong interest from tax credit investors as well as bond investors. So we do recommend approval of this project conditioned upon the closing of first mortgage financing or bond financing, which also requires our credit enhancement. So we don't have all of the final term sheets in place is my point. And that's going to be the final condition to close.
Okay. And then I have a question on the pledge agreement. Just to be clear what that means, we're saying that we're gonna hold $550,000 from PANO towards the completion of this project.
Yes.
All right.
It will, so the way we would like to do it, we think the simplest way to do it is to have a pledge agreement with the bank that ends up buying the bonds.
Okay.
And we have our money on reserve, or a good chunk of our money at the Federal Home Loan Bank right now. So we would like to pledge from that account.
Okay,
It would be for a limited time. And then in exchange, we will be a guarantor of the project. So there'd be a guarantee fee due to finance the Warrens at closing.
gotcha. Thank you, Dave.
And we would reserve that fee and 550,000 through the construction period. And it will be released once the project is in occupancy.
And the fundings, one more on there, the sources that we have here. I know you said some of these will come on, I guess, after construction, or some on before. Which one of those?
Yeah, I think now is a good time to bring in Mr. Kennedy so he can walk through some of the finer details, but in general, Chair Chase, what happens on these low-income housing tax credit deals is there's a 50% rule. So if you're going to get 4% tax credits, 50% of the funding at least has to come from tax exempt bonds.
Right.
So even if, like Mr. Kennedy is lined up more than enough to have a bond size of 1 million, despite that, he has to issue 5.5 million to meet that 50% rule through construction. And then that other funding comes in on the backside. So there's a construction chart and a permanent chart, and we're going to update this summary sheet for our next deal so it can be clear. Because sometimes it's all one and the same, but in many cases, they're two separate funding columns, construction and permanent. So Mr. Kennedy, can you come up and,
I got some water in my throat.
yeah, sure.
I don't know where you want to stand.
Understand those right here. So,
If I can get a little swig of water, y'all don't mind. I'm kind of a shy guy, you know. Want to first thank the board for giving me this opportunity to present you all with this project to you all today, and also thank Damon and Byron, who I've been working with closely on this. As Damon has said, this project is super important because this is really truly a public-private partnership. As you can see from all the different funding sources that I had to cobble up over the last 3 years working on this deal has been difficult in every sense of the word because this project is located in the Central City National Historic District, and then being in a National Historic District and having federal funds going into it, we had to go through the State Historic Preservation Office. And so we had to make some original design revisions from what we really had, and it changed, and it escalated the cost. But also what's so unique about this project, I think I heard Damon say about microgrids. This project is going to have solar and storage. So we're going to be able to capture energy from the sun, but we're also going to be able to store it on hand. And one of the reasons why I was thinking about that, because I think it was Hurricane Rita or Ida, one of the last hurricanes, we heard about seniors getting stuck on the 4th, 5th, and 6th floor, and some of them unfortunately passed away. So what this building would ensure is that we will always have a power source. It wouldn't be used to power the individual units, but it would be used to power the elevators, the common areas, because I live downtown, not too far away from here, and when our power went out, we was still able to plug a extension cord in the hallway in the common area to be able to power our refrigerator. And as seniors, some of them are on insulin and other, died, different medication that they need refrigerated. So that was one of the thinking that that I had in mind when I asked the team to make sure that they include that into the project. It also located close to many other public amenities such as Walmart, also Walgreens, and a few other things like financial institution that's located real close nearby. Last week, we also got the final approval from the State Bond Commission. And then next week we go, December the 14th, we go to the Louisiana Housing Corporation for the notice of intent to sell, which is the last, I guess, public process I'll have to go on the state level. And I know we'll still have to get approval from this body, the final approval. So that's basically what it is. And one other thing that I would like to also mention is that as a developer, we get to make so many impacts on the community. So, hiring an architect, hiring a contractor, but the contractor, yeah, I'm a minority developer, but the contractor also have requirements that they're going to have to meet as well by ensuring that minority and women-owned businesses get contracting opportunities that we submitted to the city Department of Office of Supply Diversity as well. So this is truly a public-private partnership, and they have a tremendous amount of multiplier effects about the many people that's going to have an impact on. So I'll be open to take any questions that you all have of me. But if not, thank y'all for allowing me to present.
I don't sit on the programs committee. I'm just curious, the site, it sounds like something's there. And is it just getting it back
No.
into commerce?
So
or-
nothing is
I
not
don't
there.
know anything
Actually,
about it, yeah.
this was a site that the Housing Authority bought in 1965.
Okay.
And it developed some housing, and then I think they tore down the site at in about 2000. So it's actually been vacant since 2000. And it's located 2 blocks off of St. Charles Avenue, 1 block off of Jackson Avenue, right behind the Drives YMCA. So, you know, seniors can be able to go walk over to the Drives YMCA. We also have some agreements in place with some community organizations that want to offer seniors, like maybe they want to do yoga. Maybe we can do some filming, and we also want to allow the community space in this building to be accessed by the community, you know, as well. And so we've been, you know, working a long time with the community working on this project. And initially we did have some pushback because whenever you have an empty site, folks just figure that the site will stay empty forever. And as we know, this site was bought with government resources from HUD. And so eventually we knew housing was going to go back there. And so once I said, and, you know, being a community member, I went knock on doors and kind of quell some of the concerns that neighbor had. And, you know, some of them had concerns about parking. And as we know, most low-income seniors, especially, they're going to be on a fixed income. And I think Social Security pays about $740 a month. So most of them can't even afford a vehicle, even though we have 11 parking spots on the site as well.
Is this 100% senior?
Is 100% senior afforded. And so we're going to have a long-term ground lease with the Housing Authority. So they're going to always have affordable housing there. And plus we went through the affordable housing plan development with the city of New Orleans through a zoning process. And I think I filed those zoning plans with the conveyance office maybe a couple of weeks ago, because we needed to do that before the final permit can be issued. That's just a part of the conditional use process.
Right, and then your contractor, you said you have identified a contractor?
Yes, the contract is PEC. And so I think Damon also kind of mentioned, and that's some of the requirements at financial institutions as well. They want to see like the contractor has done a project like this, and they have the license and the bonding capacity. And so PEC have experience in doing, you know, multifamily, and then just their whole team. And they also have the bonding capacity as well, because you got to have payment bonds and performance bonds. And so one other thing is, and also to make sure that we keep construction costs locked in, I got the contractor to agree to a guaranteed max price on construction. So I wouldn't have to worry about any change orders that might surprise. And I made sure that the architect in his designs and making sure that there's no errors. So the contractor can't say, oh, well, they missed this. And so we can come back and change it. Here, we got a change order. And so that was one of the things that I've been working extensively. I've been involved in every single part of the process from beginning to this point where we are today.
Is this project value engineered in as the contractor and the architect in the process of actually building? If the contractor sees the cost savings to you, is that something that's passed on?
We did, but what will happen because when we had, you know, an increase in cost because of the design, we had to change. And so that I'm grateful to the city of New Orleans, who's been a great partner. The city received some additional ARPA funds, and I'm pretty sure folks probably received that news letter, a press release, I should say. And we was able to go back to the city of New Orleans and ask them for some additional resources so we can keep the design as it is. Because now I wish we had a picture of the design. It's a beautiful project. It don't even look like an affordable housing development. We have balconies, we have shutters. So we think it's going to be an added value to the community. So we did think about trying to do some value engineering, but once the city did agree to helping us fill that gap, we just kept the design that we had in place. And we still will look for some value engineering, but right now how we think the building is designed and getting the contractor to agree to that guaranteed max price that we good and we shouldn't have to worry about any cost overruns.
How many stories is the building?
It's gonna be 4 stories, but it looks, how the architect designed it, and they're a great architecture firm. It don't actually look like it's 4 stories. So we did like some step down approaches. And I can email you the construction design if you wanted to see more of the details as well. You want.
Mr. Kennedy, can you talk about the challenge of doing a 4% tax credit deal for 22 units? I mean, normally these deals are a little bit bigger, but as an emerging developer, he's just trying to get in where he can fit in. So there are challenges here, but I would like you to just kind of talk a little bit about.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, so as Damon said earlier, I've been working on the project for really 3 years. In the prior years, I went after the 9% tax credits. Just wasn't successful just because how the QAP was constructed. And so after those 2 times was unsuccessful, I decided to take the 4% tax credit, which is a non-competitive route. But it only provides about 30 to 35% equity. So you have a huge amount of gap that you have to fill. And with the number, with the rents, it's hard to make these types of deals feasible. And so it's been extremely difficult just because, as you can see, the total cost per unit is higher than traditionally on other projects that's larger. And the reason why is because when you have larger developments, you can spread those costs out over multiple units. And so by this, and that actually came up, it didn't come up in the bond commission, but I did have some of those questions was asked by analysts that work for the bond commission. And I was able to explain to them that, you know, the lieutenant governor's office, they had to approve of the design. And when you have these different requirements, when you work in a historic district, it drives up costs. Yeah. And so that's been some of the difficulty. And also one of the things I wanted to also pinpoint what Damon was saying earlier is that whenever you're doing these type of developments, financial institution and tax credit investors, both of them have guarantee requirements. And traditionally those guarantee requirements is having $1 million in liquidity and $5 million in net worth. And a lot of BIPOC developers just don't have that across the country, and especially in New Orleans. And so such programs which you all are trying to do with the pledge agreement, I think it will help enhance the community and help more BIPOC developers get in this. Because tax credit, I went to school for real estate development at Tulane, and it still was difficult. Just because, you know, schools teach you one thing, they teach you the theoretical and stuff, but when you actually get involved into, you know, a tax credit buying deal, you get to learn a lot. And that's what I did. I assembled a great team. You know, my the law firm that represents Baker Donaldson. And so they've been experienced in doing a lot of these types of transactions. I also have Little and Associate, which is a CPA firm that's focused specifically on tax credit accounting. And so that's what it took. So I always tell folks, I know what I know, but I'm comfortable knowing that I don't know everything at all. And so I assembled a great team. And once again, it's been great working with, you know, Byron and Damon, because that's what I love about the entrepreneur minds. They're like, hey, Stephen, what you hearing in the market, and coming back and tell. And I think that's what they've been working to try to craft a program like this where they can help not only myself do this deal and multiple other deals after this, I hope, but also helping other developers that look like me in this community. So I thank y'all once again for this board, you know, in consideration and doing what y'all do to help, you know, BIPOC developers.
One more quick question. You could probably teach a class yourself now after this. So after construction is completed, like, who manages the site? Is it you, or does it?
So I bring on a property manager. So that's one of the requirements that the Louisiana Housing Corporation also have is that you have, as a developer, you got to bring on a property management firm that have experience and, you know, doing income certifications. Even though all of our tenants, and I forgot to mention this, all of our tenants are going to be project-based vouchers. So all of our tenants are basically going to be sent to us from the Housing Authority of New Orleans. So the income certification actually is going to be done by the Housing Authority, but we still have to have a management firm that have experience in doing that. And so that's another great piece about having a project-based voucher, because it's mostly good for the permanent financing side of the deal, just because, you know, like all those funds automatically get deposited into the account, you know, on a monthly basis.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. And just one more note about the project, and most of these projects that we're going to see, particularly the ones that have deep affordability. You'll notice in the notes to this plan, and we have the full feasibility report as well, that the debt service coverage, which tells us how profitable the project is, it tends to start very low. So the Louisiana Housing Corporation has a minimum of 1.1 debt service coverage. So projects need to be above that threshold in order to just get started. And a lot of them typically start out in that 1.1 to 1.2 range. Mr. Badger's seen all of our projects that from a debt service perspective. So, but they grow over time as the projects are managed, as the costs start to settle. You know, the cost of living in these projects typically don't change much over time. But the idea is that we still want to create quality buildings and have quality management, so that even though the underlying value of that project may not be growing like a market rate project, it still maintains its quality and it's still feasible. And also there's a ceiling on what a developer can make, and it's 1.4. Is that right, Mr. Kennedy? So this project can't go above 1.4 debt service coverage. So by definition, you know, these projects are meant to stay within a certain affordability range. And sometimes those margins can be thin, but we've been working with the city, with the developers, LAC, to make sure that these projects are still sustainable over the long run. I think that's important for the board to know, because all of the projects that you're going to see will look like that. Unless it has a substantial market rate component, then the debt service coverage should start out a little bit higher.
Do we need to act on this?
No,
This
this
was
is,
just information.
So
yeah, thank you, Mr. Chase, for allowing us to put this on your agenda. This was actually for the programs committee. So as per our process, the deals come before the programs committee. We recommend them to the full board for approval. So you'll get that recommendation for next board meeting for approval.
Thank you. Seeing no other new business and no questions, we'll move on to the agenda item number 5, Finance and Investment Committee reports. Badger.
Take it on there. So good afternoon. So I'll start with the, as I normally do, with the update, and then I'll move into the financial status. So as we all know, inflation continues to dominate the headlines. You know, the most recent inflation data came in lower than expected, which may signal some sign of relief for the markets as well as for the feds. That has a tough job right now. But this may also signal that we're in this disinflationary period or this trend going into next year, hopefully. But we'll need to see how the next couple of cycles of CPI come. But overall, the headline CPI came in at 7.7 from a year ago. That's the smallest annual increase since January. So we've been seeing some huge increases since then. And that's down from 8.2 in September. Looking at the core index came in at 6.3, and then the prior week is 6.7. So moving in the right direction, but there's still some housing inflation, and there's still some wage inflation that's weighing on the services part of that calculation. So we'll continue to monitor that. As expected, we saw the feds. They came out with their 6th consecutive rate hike of 75 basis points. So the Fed fund rate is at 3.75 to 4% now. That's the target rate. So we'll, and you know, they're monitoring the CPI as well. They'll make their call decisions on that in terms of how the CPI falls. Job growth, the numbers still look strong. The October number increased slightly. So it's still relatively strong. Non-farm payrolls is 261,000. The unemployment rate moved up slightly to 3.7 from 3.6 in the prior. And then looking locally, the unemployment rate in Albany Parish is 4.9 in September. And that's lower from the previous reading, 5.5. So that's the third consecutive month of decline in Albany Parish. That's a movement in the right direction. But of course, we're still on the front end of all this. All right, so I'll move into the financial status report. So not a lot of activity in the month of October. This is the year-to-date numbers. See, actual revenues are at 218,000 to a budget of 669,000. Shortfall there is 447,000. The driver there is the multifamily line. We have everything Mr. Burns mentioned. We have 4 projects underway right now. And so, those 4 will really catapult us, on to next year. We had a little slow up this year, of course. With the slow movement. And then on the expense side, 1.5 actual to a budget of 1.9. So we have favorability there of 423,000. So mainly favorable across the board there. So we've been pretty conservative on the expense side. Next slide. So we have the 13-month trending here. You see we're slightly lower than prior month on revenues and a lot lower on the expense side. This was a quiet month there. 110 is well below our running average on the expense side. And that's just related to the month prior. We had a lot of consulting expenses with that expense line. Next. Year over year balance sheet comparison, operating balance sheet here. Pretty much same composition, minimal activity, so nothing. Next slide. This is our pathways. No activity here. It's mainly, we have maintenance and repairs and insurance expenses, utility expenses here. So year to date, our revenues, which is our interest income on our accounts, is $2,000, and then on the expense side, expense 36,000. All right, and then we have our cash and cash equivalents. We're at 8.4 as of the end of October, which is down slightly from roughly. I will note we did not have a finance and investments committee, so this is. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question, Byron. Yeah, I know we normally look at these once a month, but since we're going to be talking budget today, can we do for the cash and the cash equivalents? Can we just know what the number was this time last year? And apologies for my tardiness.
So that number was 9.4. I'm sorry, I'm looking at this.
So yeah, it would be November, right? Or October. Mhm.
The number was 9.6.
Thank you very much.
there, I'll move into the proposed budget. So this presentation, this is not up for approval today. Today will be a preliminary look at the budget. We did not have this again, finance and investment committee. But we will have a look at this budget again in December. And the idea is to get this approved by the board in December. And it's really not much different from the numbers and figures that Mr. Byrne presented a few months ago. Slightly different, but I'll run through that. But the overall goal going into this year, of course, is to focus on doing more with less. As we know, there's a lot of challenges in the market right now, especially with the market signs and the Fed actions. Discuss the interest rates and impact on the business with that. But we also know this opens up a lot of opportunities for us as well. And it kind of exacerbates the issues that we trying to tackle. So there's going to be a tremendous amount of opportunity to move back into the bond market that we discussed as well. So we also know capital is and will always continue to be an issue and our biggest challenge as well. That came out of the retreat. Continue to spend a lot of time in front of investors and strategizing with our partners and community impact bond. And then we faced some operational human capital turnover this year. And then we have some just operational inefficiencies from a technology standpoint that we've been wanting to get in place. So, all this was taken into account with crafting and developing this budget and doing our best to tie it to our strategic plan, our initiatives, and we came out of the board. So this preliminary budget is currently set at 1.9 million. That's about 276,000 from our prior year budget. The total revenues are budgeted at 812,000, which is slightly higher than our budget last year, which is 803,000. We're looking to allocate from our reserves 1.1. That's 284,000 less than what we did last year as well. So overall, this budget is 12% lower than last year. Next page.
Wait. Do that one more time? I just want to make sure I understood.
Yeah. So the overall 1.9, last year our budget was 3.2.
There you go. Never mind. I got it. This is what I need. Yes.
Yeah, I'll get to that.
Yeah, I just need the numbers. That's why I was like, wait, what? All right. No, you can go ahead.
Yeah, no, this just provides a visual of our, our revenue assumptions. Total revenues, as I mentioned, 812, right? That consists of, starting from the left, 15,000 in interest income from our cash accounts. That's slightly higher given interest rates. We're going to earn a little bit more on our accounts. 39,000 in single family issuer fees from our existing outstanding bonds. That's a little lower because that number, comes down as we pay off that debt. 250,000 in grant revenue, which we've actually secured 150,000 of that already from our grant with the Herman Foundation. That's been approved, but we should be receiving that just in time as a start. We're budgeting 250,000 grant revenue application there. And then the bulk of our revenue come from multifamily income, 508, which would consist of 5 pilot transactions, 2 kinds of which last year we budgeted 7 pilot transactions and 3 conduits. This year we tailed that down. We know going into next year we're already set.
And of the 7 and 3, we did what, 4 and 1?
We did, some are in underwriting right now.
Mhm.
We did two. We did two of the pilots.
And none of the bonds. Okay. So you're hoping that they'll roll over, we're hoping that they roll over to next year.
Yes.
Okay,
We have three deals in underwriting or that have just passed underwriting and one getting ready to enter underwriting. Those are all pilots, I believe, right?
right, right, right.
All right, next page. This moves into the expense portion. This is a tree map that kind of gives you a gauge of the expense components. We lowered, as I mentioned, the budget by 12%. The biggest driver is the salaries and benefits line. We're not replacing the vacant positions that we have out there. Just freeze that. So you'll see that salaries and employees. And the next slide will kind of give the details of the numbers, but that line is 269,000 lower. That's a major driver there. The other driver is the capital expenditure line, which we allocated that to the renovation of 618. And Damon and I have been talking. We haven't flushed this out yet, but we're going to see if there's ways that we can redevelop this property at minimal cost, because we know the way we intended on redeveloping that property, it was upwards of $2 million plus in terms of getting that back on board. So we think there's ways that we can leverage and partner with some of our partners and developers to have a minimal or less cost than $2 million. So we don't strategize on that. So we took that out. But we do have some roof repairs that we need to that needs our attention. We're looking to get that completed as well as we flush out the strategy.
And is that a part of the capital?
That's in this year's budget. And so I know we're just about at the finish line with that.
Okay.
We looked at several roofers, we put out an RFP, and we make a selection.
Okay, so y'all not anticipating any other work to be done in 2023?
Not at this time.
On the building?
Okay.
With,
Or not, or nothing that costs that while the board there may be a strategy that's developed that doesn't require a capital investment.
Right. That's all right.
Or you may find something that is a minimum capital investment. That's what y'all looking for. Like, you're
That's
looking at low to none
Exactly.
capital investment. But the board will, if you find an option, the board would have to sign off on that.
And even ways that we talked about, and Damon had, he could probably explain more, but it's ways we can generate revenue, some income from the property.
I mean, all that's great, but I just want to make sure that we have accounted for it somewhere in this budget, even if it's minimal capital cost. I mean, I have taken it out completely, so.
Yeah, so we had 70,000 allocated
Mhm.
in this year's budget, which we're planning to deploy hopefully this year. So we'll use the budget dollars for this,
Okay.
for the roof.
Right, but I think Giselle's point is something might happen. And to have nothing means that you're going to have to come and get something.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
if you
just
don't
a thought,
spend it,
I mean,
yeah, if you don't
know,
spend it,
yeah.
that's fine, but if, right, that's what you meant. I mean, I can't disagree. Because I'm just thinking about, yeah, where the insurance costs are all inside of the administrative expenses?
Yeah, there's the insurance has its own line.
Oh, sure.
taxes and
I
insurance.
got it, there it is, okay.
So that's tough. But yeah, that is. So that.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that, the building has had challenges. It's been sitting since the lessors used it. One question I had was, what is the big change between the operating and maintenance expenses between last year and this year.
Yeah, that changes the office lease. There was an increase.
And that's the increase is just that, so.
That is it. That's just that, yeah.
Yeah, things are going up. I mean, and again, you know, the building is on our books. It's not generating any income. It does go towards our assets. But yeah, we have to figure out something else to get it back online. So I do have one question about the marketing budget and what did we spend this year?
We spent, so if you turn to the next page. So you'll see the 2022 projected column, first column. So we really have not deployed our marketing and advertising dollars.
Yeah, that's why I was confused. I was like, so what do we hope to spend? Because we're rolling it forward. So I assume that means we think that this year will be different and
Yeah, and that ties to.
and what does the
board-
difference look like?
Yeah, that ties to the feedback from the board retreat, because initially we tailed that line down.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
So you'll see 18 or 19,000 projected for this year. Last year we had 110,000. Initially, the first iteration, we flattened, I
Right.
think we declined, we moved it to 50,000. After the board retreat, we said, okay, we need to bring this back up to 110.
Yeah.
To the prior, budget.
No, I remember the conversation. I'm just, that means we're gonna see something different.
Right, and so, so we've started having conversations with some marketing partners, potential partners, to discuss, we discussed the marketing initiatives, getting some analysis done, doing a customer roadmap, and so we've started collecting proposals for that. And so the first step, and we mentioned this in the programs, the first step is to get the budget approval, and then we can move forward with selecting those proposals. But we're actively, we've heard the feedback, and the feedback was we need to really get some professional customer roadmap and professional market sizing going. So that's what we intend.
And some of that might impact the single family program income, right? We might be able to, that's not the purpose, but we could see more people coming through that program.
Yeah. There's some financial market challenges.
Exactly.
On that
Like I
side,
said, it's smart that you didn't try to say, try to budget for that. If it happens, it'll be ancillary and a pleasant surprise.
Sure.
So that increase, decrease in the salaries and benefits line, of course, there's some gaps there that we need to fill. We decided to leverage our consultants and partners more. So you'll see an increase in that consultant professional services line, as well as the business development line. That all consists of partners, consultants that we need. But still overall, once again, this is a lower budget overall. And then one other thing to point out is the technology services. If we can go back to the schedule. So technology services is a big, huge area where we have not fully deployed, those funds as well. You see that 52,000. That's just our basic IT services. But we have not, last year we were looking to bring in a data warehouse or a huge company to come in and do that, like Salesforce. It's expensive. They wanted like 140,000 a year for that. And so we've been able to bring that in-house, and we're going to build that in-house through a consultant at a much cheaper cost. So you'll see that's elevated slightly. from the prior year's budget, and that is basically to bring in customer relationship management system, enterprise risk management system, and then a data warehouse. And all of that is, Damon mentioned the automated application for the Sustainable Development Program. That's going to be huge, a game changer to be able to automate that process, to be able to capture data, be able to use that data to do analysis and move forward. Right now, we can't do that. It's a regular PDF. It's a lot of time from the developer standpoint, from staff standpoint, from the underwriting standpoint. Automate that whole process and save a lot of time to do that. So we're already, we have the consultant lined up for that, and that process is actually already.
Another note to add to that is that the single-family programs and infrastructure programs will also be a beneficiary of the transformation plan. So the data, the enterprise system that Mr. Badger is speaking of, we need all of that to back up an online application on our website. So if you go on our website now, there's a lot of information on there. It looks good, looks clean. We get a lot of compliments on it, but it's not very functional from the perspective of accessing funding through Finance New Orleans. That's what people want to know. The information is great, and we'll still have that, but people need to come and use our website. And as you know, just part of the governmental transformation or digital transformation that's going on, cybersecurity or cyber risk is going up. So we have to account for all of those things now that we just didn't before. But we think this is going to increase our productivity, our production, because people have a direct line to us, and it'll just make the application process a lot clearer and more efficient. So more to come, in other words, on the digital investment that we need to make over the next 5 years. There's a lot of other items that just we can't do all in 1 year, but we need to be working towards.
The last thing I'll just point out is just to note that looking at projected column, the overall expenses 1.8, and we'll talk about that every month. This is projected, but we're looking to come in roughly 500,000. Just shows it's pretty conservative. There's some areas where we have to fully deploy. That concludes my report. You have a question?
I don't have, well, I
Anything you
guess,
would like to see?
I guess we have time for feedback. We'll be approving this at the next board.
At the next board. So what we'll do is, and we did it the last few years, we'll send out an email with the budget again so you can see it. Mr. Wooten and Mr. Badger normally meet and takes in all your feedback, and we normally have a call before the last board meeting of the year. So we'll send out an email. You can respond to that email. You can reach out directly to Mr. Wooten or directly to Mr. Badger. We'll take that into account. And then we present you with the final budget in December.
That's a meeting for,
We need to do that tonight.
that's
Because
a-
it runs up against Christmas.
yeah,
so
yeah, it's a little tricky.
Unless y'all want to come on Christmas.
We'll move on the agenda to item number 6, which I think we discussed, but I mean, if Vice Chair Marsh, you had anything to add for Programs Committee, please do. If not, we'll keep.
No, we
on
can keep
rolling.
moving as I missed it, so.
But that
Thank
was
y'all.
the informational, as we talked about with the Barone development. And so we'll move on to item number 7, which goes back to you. Director.
Thank you. Few news items and highlights from the month. We're continuing to develop a strategy for the $27 billion fund of directly from the Inflation Reduction Act. We spoke a little bit about this in the Programs Committee, but essentially we need to have multiple strategies going at once. This is a lot of money, and this is I'm not gonna say once in a lifetime event, because but this is a shot in the arm for the country, for many communities around the country that won't come around very often. Let me just say it like that. So there may be other stimulus programs in the future, I'm sure, but this is a pretty big one and a transformational one. So in addition to that 27 billion, there are also other incentives that we can take advantage of. For example, we talked about them last month, but combining tax exempt bonds with renewable energy credits. And that's something that hadn't been done very frequently before, but we have the platform to do it. So in addition to that 27 billion that's out there, there's some other mechanical improvements to these programs that we can take advantage of. But we're targeting at least $50 million in funding, and that may come from 3 separate channels: our national channel, which is the Coalition of Green Capital, or the American Green Bank Consortium. At the state level, the state is trying to determine what it wants its green bank to look like. So we're a little bit ahead of them in the planning process, but we have been communicating with them and plan to participate in their development, because it's going to be important to us. Just like the Louisiana Housing Corporation is important to our housing programs, the state level green bank is going to be important to our infrastructure programs. So we certainly want to have a relationship with them. And then, of course, we have the Resilient New Orleans Working Group, which is the local consortium of agencies led by the city of New Orleans and co-led by Finance New Orleans. So we put together our Resilient New Orleans Finance Plan a few years ago, and you approved that last year. So that is our blueprint. That's our Bible for making green infrastructure investments in the city. And that's a spinoff of the city's climate plan. So the fact that we have that plan and that we've done that work puts us in good position to receive this funding. And we mentioned this at the programs committee, but we've received feedback from different investors and funders that we are well prepared and a little more prepared than many agencies around this topic, because we're in New Orleans and we deal with it so much and it's so personal for us. So that's an advantage that we have, and we're going to continue to leverage it. The fact that we put together all of our reports, sometimes those reports can just collect dust and nobody ever uses them. But we try to keep them at the front of our conversation, because that shows that we're prepared to receive the funding. And connected to the work being done with the Inflation Reduction Act, legal is helping us to develop a CEA between the city and all of the other agencies of the Resilient New Orleans Working Group, which will, of course, be another channel for us to go after the EPA funding. So this CEA between all of the groups is the foundation that allows us to move forward. So everybody is on board. They're ready for this. If you recall, we had a schedule mapped out, and then Delta happened. So I was going to spend a little time at the different board meetings around the city. I don't think I had to come to the RTA, but airport, sewage and water board, every agency was different in terms of what they wanted out of this. NORA, HANO, all of these agencies are going to be a part of this. So we'll get ourselves together on that front, and then we also have $600,000 of grant funding coming to us from the city. We talked about that in previous meetings. That grant funding is specifically for solar projects. We're working with the city resilience office to determine exactly what that means. Is that single family solar, is that multifamily, or only infrastructure? We're going to see what kind of flexibility we have for that funding, but that's a good seed funding to help us get some of these programs started. And lastly, as you know, we've been working on our community impact bond issue. And that community impact bond issue has always been around the $25 million mark. But it's really evolving to a larger amount per the request of the market. The market likes larger dollar amounts. And we're talking about a long-term plan, 10, 15-year plan. So what we're learning is that we just have to figure out a way to finance this plan in chunks. It's really hard to finance it all at once. So we're actively working with investors that have spent a little more time with us than others to craft a new strategy. So this is going to be ongoing. We're moving into next year. We want to be able to start getting some yeses from the different partners that we need to execute this bond issue.
So Damon, just one quick question about the CEA funding. So when is that going to be incorporated into the budget, and how does, or is it broken up over different programs?
So that money is specifically for capital projects, the 600,000.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's not for operating funding. It will go directly into a program fund, which would be our Resilient New Orleans Fund.
Gotcha. So it wouldn't show up on the main budget.
It will show up in the balance sheet.
Gotcha.
But part of that budgeting process, which is, we've been telling you for the last few years, we want to have our own capital budget too,
Mhm.
attached to it. So that work is still being developed. We actually do have a capital budget. We just haven't formalized it to be a part of this operating budget because it still has some gaps in it. So we're getting close. And so, you know, as we just presented the budget, operating budget, you'll also see a capital budget that shows how much we have in each fund, how much we plan to use in a given year, depending on the production.
And so do we think that will be something that the board will be seeing for approval for next year, or for next year's planning process for 2024?
Well, the city told us the funding needs to be spent by September of 23.
Okay, so that means that it's gonna, you guys are gonna have to put a budget together, a capital budget together for us to review for 2023.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
Has to be spent by the city or us, by the city, by us. Oh, okay.
September of 23.
so so January, you thinking?
We'll have a call with the city next week.
Okay.
So that we can get a deadline. They were pushing us to stop. So we have a call with them next week, and actually a few other calls, some planning calls coming up. So we'll get more details for the December meeting. But we do have a model. I mentioned the financial model that we developed. And our financial advisor helped us, our impact advisor helped us. So that model is inclusive of the capital budget. It outlines where our funds are and how they're going to be spent over the coming years.
So,
Next slide, please. I'm sorry, actually, can you go back one slide, please?
I was
Naj?
gonna ask about the last item.
Yeah, well, that is the impact bond issue, but I wanted to point out specifically, we just saw a project, the Rome Villas project, which is a DBE project, a DBE-led project, and you know, that project's being done independent, on an independent basis. So the developer is going out, talking to different banks, getting his own funding, getting their own tax credits. And we just heard about the complications around pulling these projects together, particularly when you're a small developer. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do them. You know, these small developers are the ones that are going to grow to the larger developers that can create the kind of impact we want to see in New Orleans. So we have to nurture them. So what we've been proposing to the market is that we want at least a series of our bonds to be dedicated toward DBE developers every year. So you'll see 5 developers come up at once. Is the thought process, and that happens at some of the other agencies around the country. So nothing's truly unique about that. Pool financings happen all the time, but we haven't done it here in New Orleans at scale. And what we want to do is do it at scale. So we're asking funders to commit to 5 years worth of pool financings for DBE developers, totaling $250 million. So we have a $1 billion community investment goal over the next 10 to 15 years. So that represents about a quarter of that. And I said earlier, we got to figure out a way to do this in chunks. And that's one of the strategies that we're looking at employing. So the feedback has been good. There's some tweaks that we have to make to the current proposal that's out there. But so far, the response has been positive. We just got to figure out a way to get everybody completely comfortable. So one party gets comfortable, like maybe a foundation, the bank's still a little uncomfortable. So it's a little bit of an art that we're going through to get everybody to the finish line.
And when you say it's evolved here, you mean that originally, yeah, we're being very conservative with the estimates that it would be 25 million, and that you're seeing enough now and interest that you think it can be 250.
Yeah, so the 25 million, the original ask was for enterprise level funding. So the muni bond market is not an enterprise funding marketplace. the muni bond market prefers projects. It's built around doing project financing. So as we went out and said, hey, we're starting over as an agency. And I'm sorry, we didn't introduce Mr. Milazzo. We'll do that at the end of this report. But for Mr. Milazzo's benefit, we had $400 million in assets when Katrina happened. About 43 million in net assets. And 10 years ago, 10 years removed from, I should say 10 years removed from Katrina, that was down to 30 million in total assets and about 10 million in net assets. So the story we've been telling the marketplace is that we provided a great deal of impact to this community over the decades. We ran into Katrina, we ran into the recession, the BP oil spill, a bunch of storms, and then COVID. And all those events back to back to back have prevented us from providing the impact that we see as possible in this community. So we've been asking for them to jumpstart our balance sheet by investing in a $25 million impact bond issue, which will give us a little more capital. So you saw our budget, you saw our bank account was at about 8.3 million. So this 25 million will come in to enhance that number so that we can provide more support to the projects like the one you just saw. That was the original ask. That doesn't quite fit into the muni bond market, so we've had to adjust. But we also wanted to think bigger, and we know we can't just take on a bunch of debt at one time either. We got to kind of create our revenue as we create the debt, and that's what we've done over our history anyway. For the board members that have been here for those past bond issues, your revenues are built into those bond issues, and that's something we're trying to communicate to the foundations, to the banks, that we're not like a private bank where we can take on all that capital at one time. We really have to do it in phases. And that's what we mean by it's evolved. So we've plotted out $250 million of bond issues over the next 5 years based on the pipeline that we have. By the way, we currently have $90 million in bond deals for DBE developers in the pipeline for a total development cost of 139 million. So that 90 million, of course, is not the whole 250 million, but we have 5 years to hit that mark. So the idea is that as we get these applications, we want to roll them into pools and do those deals all at once. So there's some infrastructure that needs to go around that. Some of the consultants, some of the budget items that we have in place will go to help us manage this bond issue and some of the other bond issues. But the bottom line is it'd be hard for Finance New Orleans to take on a lot of debt at once. We don't have the cash flow just yet, as you saw. So we're trying to get the market to buy into the strategy of us building it as we go.
And so we're talking about the hope is first tranche, if it's 250 over 5 years, so 50 a year. So a good goal for next year would be to see that 50 out the door, right?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. So we're going to do a call in January, and we're setting a couple of market entry points throughout the course of the year. And single family may have different windows than multifamily. We're still trying to decide that, but we know that we're going to pick at least 2 multifamily windows a year. So that'll give ourselves time to get the pool organized, get everybody up to speed. You know, also the point of this is to help accelerate the project. So like Mr. Kennedy's project, we saw he's been working on it for 3 years, and we don't know how much of that time we could have shaved off, but certainly putting more support around developers like Mr. Kennedy, we can help make these things more efficient. You know, he's still gonna have to go out and get his own team, the right team, but there's some administrative organization that can be done for all these projects, particularly with LAC and the State Bond Commission. It's going to save a lot of time. And we can consolidate our ask to the funders, to the city. So we have as you know, a $10 million ask out to the city right now to support this pool.
Right, because that's what they would be using they have a variety of sources that they could be using for some of this, including their own,
The GA, right?
Yeah.
We have the 10 million is for ARPA funding, right? So as the last we heard from the city, our request is still active. We know that they allocated 40 million.
What are they
for
doing
affordable
with
housing.
their bond financing, the $500 million that was interestingly labeled the Affordable Housing and Infrastructure Fund, but only 10% of, 5% of it is for affordable housing.
Some of that funding has been invested in projects like Mr. Kennedy's project. We received the GEO fund, correct? So they're starting to spread it around in individual projects. But we're also working with the city on a larger scale housing plan to map out over the long run, same way we're doing with our individual finances, how much bonding capacity the city has over the next 10 to 15 years that can be dedicated to housing. Because that 25 million isn't enough. It's not nearly enough to support the housing investments that are needed. And that's a trend that is happening around the country where cities are beginning to use their GEO bond authority and allocating it toward housing projects. A couple of cities that are notable for it, Austin, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia. It's being done out in California. Seattle, I know, has allocated some GEO bond funding. So the logic is that this funding won't come from anywhere else. Federal funding is slowed up and it just can't come at that level. So cities are beginning to reinvest their GEO capacity into housing. And so we're encouraging the city to do more of that. And we're going to map out a long-term plan with the other agencies. So that work is happening right now.
Okay.
Next slide, please. And this just a final look at one more look at our roadmap from this year. We were able to accomplish quite a bit. The Resilient Innovation Fund, we've combined that with the infrastructure. So those are going to be one and the same moving forward. And the $35 million bond issue that was approved earlier this year in January for Christopher Park, that deal is still on the sidelines due to increased costs. So it may come back, but again, that's Hanover-owned property. So it's still in the city's possession. We just have to figure out the right time to get it to market.
So would that one be counted in the 2 for next year?
No, we didn't count that.
Oh, so it would be Lanyap.
Yes.
It might go this year, so we would at least not have 0 this year.
Right.
Or it might go next year to add on to the other 2 that you're hoping for.
And then lastly, of course, the 25 million impact bond issue. We're going to continue working through final details of it, but we're getting close. We're getting close on at least a yes or a no. So we've been put, we put a lot of work into having that conversation and presenting it to the whole market. So we've talked to anybody that will listen. The whole market knows about this $25 million impact bond. The banks, the mutual funds, the foundation. So our name is out there, and again, it's being positively received, but we'll keep working on those details through next year. Next slide, please. And here's a quick look at our action plan for next year. This is a summary snapshot. There's some other action items on here, like our digital transformation plan, some more marketing specific items, but this one is centered around our core work, which is our programs. So in the first column, sustainable home ownership or single family, we're planning to do a $15 million green bond issue for first-time home buyers. As you know, the TBA market has not yielded much benefit to us, but as interest rates are going up, our natural advantage of providing tax-exempt financing is starting to come back. So our financial advisor is working on a strategy to get us in the market next year, 2023. Now, the challenge around that is we got to have homes to distribute those mortgages to. So there's a mismatch in the amount of homes that are being developed and the amount of mortgages that we want to sell right now. So if anything prevents us from going to market, that may be an issue. So we don't want to just go out and sell bonds and not be able to originate the mortgages. We're going to end up in the financial or taking on that financial risk. So we'll present more moving forward, but we also want to keep the TBA market open, even though that channel has not worked for us. We think it could work better for us if we have our own source of soft money. So we're actively looking from those same foundations and banks and the city. We're asking for soft dollars that can go alongside our TBA program, which will be targeted at existing homeowners. So those existing homeowners don't fit into our bond program as it's traditionally set up. So we still have to figure out a way to address that demand, because we think that's probably the biggest demand right there or right now in the community. People that are already in their homes and ready and willing to make upgrades, particularly the retrofits that we like to see. And then thirdly, we've been looking at
Gotta
least,
talk about those landlords too, man. Landlords. But only if we've gotten a real rental registry. But that's okay.
so the third item is we've been looking at a lease to own program for a while now. Finance for Warrants has been looking at it for years. I think well before many of us. So that's not a new concept.
Yeah.
But there are some options out there for us. Some of our counterpart agencies are using them.
So
and
are you thinking of a traditional, like similar to the FHA product where the cash is made available and then it's sold in the secondary market once they're seasoned, or a bridge where it's property management until they can get mortgage ready?
So it's the program is offered through a third party called Trio.
Okay.
And Trio, they operate this program in different parts of the
Okay.
country, but essentially what happens
Is this
is,
the Jay-Z one?
no.
No, okay.
Byron and I had a chance to meet with this company last week at the NALFA conference. But in short, what they do is they provide FHA financing,
Mhm.
but they also set up a 5-year period where the homeowner will have the option to take over that mortgage.
Gotcha.
So they originate the mortgage on the front end,
Mhm.
but it's set up as a lease
Right.
for
they're-
5 years, and then that homeowner can come in and take it out.
Right.
But some of their payments go toward the takeout of the lease on the back end.
Okay. And then they let them handle the maintenance and everything else themselves, or,
The company, the third party company is
Will handle
responsible for that maintenance. Yeah.
okay.
So they're responsible for managing the leases
Mhm.
until they become full mortgages.
Gotcha.
But it's originated through our mortgage platform.
Okay, so we would get fees
Yes, oh yeah.
and yeah, so the buyer gets paid off. And but they basically season it. Until they can, is it only five, is it everybody's gotta be there for 5 years? Or could they get ready faster on their own pace?
I think they can get rid of faster.
Okay, but max fat, nobody gets into them for more than 5 years.
That's right. We'll
That's
bring them before you, because one of the requirements is that we have essentially we have to set up our own trust.
Yeah, somebody's gotta guarantee these things.
So we'll have a
They're
new trust.
Gonna go sideways. Some of them, but not at any disproportionate rate that's higher than any foreclosure rate. But yeah, no, this would be great because I mean, I think it would also help. Just helping people who are not ready today, but who do want to buy. Who could, being ready is complicated. You might be able to pay the mortgage, but it's gonna take a while for something like a bankruptcy to fall off, or a number of other things that make it so that you're not bankable today. And get some things moving.
We'll
would
bring
be
that
great.
company before you.
That would be great. At least, I mean, we need a lease purchase, a real lease purchase option that people would use in the open market for a very long time.
It is also a potential source of takeout for development projects.
Yeah,
So-
exactly. The developers don't have to worry. Again, they may have people in their pipeline who are ready and interested in that house and something happened. And then you could say, well, we're gonna move forward with this buyer, and Trail
Yes.
could step in. And again, the developers are made whole because they're gonna get paid off. And then that buyer will have the time that they need to be successful. Because we've seen the city try to help because of the changes in the home funding. If you do a home ownership project, now you have a fixed amount of time before you have to convert it to a rental unit if you don't sell it. And so they were trying to help the CDCs develop their own lease to purchase program. It would involve the CDCs hanging on to the property for a little bit longer which is what they're gonna have to do anyway. If they converted it to rental, then they'd own it and be renting it out. But this gave them the way to do that because they could turn it into a rental, meet the HUD regulations, the guidelines, and then sell it once the family was ready, as opposed to turning it into a rental and never turning it back into a home ownership unit. And NeighborWorks came in to help train them, and so did a couple other people. We had there was a local program I'm very familiar with that did this, and we were trying to help everybody figure out how to replicate it. And like the land trust, Nina was trying to do it and they didn't quite manage it. And a couple of the others did it on their own, but it's easier if they could just have the capital and say, look, can you take this over? Because we can't, this person's gotten into trouble. We'd like to sell them the house. We're on a clock. And then it gets the family accustomed to being a traditional mortgage holder without them saying to their CDC, who's been working with them the whole time, well, can you give us a little bit more time? It's more like a banking relationship. So yeah, this is great.
Yeah, we'll bring more detail going into next year because there are a few steps that have to come before the board in order for us to even implement this new program.
Yeah.
But it can be merged with our existing green mortgage program, and it can also be a part of our new development process where we may have to have a land trust.
We're gonna keep calling it all kinds of things green mortgages.
Individually or as a part of a collective trust with the city and other agencies. So more to come on that side.
Good.
And then as it relates to development or sustainable development, I just talked about the $50 million impact bond we want to do for DBE projects. That's an annual program we want to implement. Also, the FHA risk share program, which will allow us to offer the lowest cost financing to the community, small and large developers. So this pool, just to give you some context, this DBE pool currently does not have the credit enhancement because we don't have our FHA license. At some point, we'll be able to do all of our bond deals FHA, assuming they qualify. So we have to create a credit enhancement structure, and that's what we're doing with the foundations and the banks right now, so that we can get the program off the ground and then roll it into an FHA program. Also, we want to implement sales tax exemptions alongside the pilots. So having a pilot structure on these projects also qualifies developments for sales tax exemptions on their construction costs. So that's an added benefit to developers. We have our legal team working on that now. And then we want to start attracting larger developers to the city. Like our first bond deal that was approved earlier this year, that $35 million deal, that was a larger developer from outside of the market. And the way that we can attract larger developers is by being more organized as a city. They're out there, they're doing deals in different markets. So we have to raise the standard of doing business in New Orleans. And that's a part of attracting larger developers, along with nurturing our small emerging developers. And lastly, we want to develop the remaining F&O property, the office building we talked about, along with those 6 single family lots that we still own. And those lots we're planning to use a part of this lease to own experimentation and development experimentation. And in our green infrastructure program, of course, we want to execute that CEA with the city. We want to launch that Resilient New Orleans Fund with that $600,000 in seed funding from the city, along with the other pipeline of projects that we've been developing with the Resilient New Orleans Working Group. And we're going to continue to work on acquiring that $50 million in EPA funding. So that's a general snapshot of what we're going to do programmatically next year. We've tried to cut back or streamline our approach and focus in a little bit more. We still have to do a little cutting here and there. But in general, these are the things that we're going to focus on as an organization going into 2023. And some of them may roll into 2024. Any questions? And lastly, of course, I always leave this slide in just so we can know what our key focus areas are as an organization, things that we need to include in all of our planning moving forward. So lastly, before I conclude my comments, I'd like us to welcome in Mr. John Malazzo Jr., who represents District B. He's our newest board member. This is his first meeting. Second.
I missed the first one.
So, Mr.
Sorry.
Milazzo, would you like to share some words with the board, with the community?
The second meeting went a lot longer than the first. meeting. I'll get used to that. But thank you for having me join. I appreciate this very much. I didn't know a whole lot about your organization until Leslie Harris kind of put me in show on and told me that she would really like me to help out. So here I am. But I've got 47 years of financial industry experience. Worked in banking, commercial and retail banking. The latest job I had was actually president of a credit union, LSU's credit union in Baton Rouge, which has branches throughout the state. Have some experience with mortgages, not at the level you folks have, so I'm looking forward to learning a lot from you all, so be patient with me, please. But I'll do what I can to contribute and make this a even more successful. Thank you for having me.
Welcome.
That concludes my report.
Well, thank you. I'm always excited to see, where we headed, leaving the board retreat, the strategic planning, seeing your vision for 2023. And really, just like you said, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, I believe, for this organization when you talk about
Again.
all of things that's coming about, if we can grasp them and just get some of those to come in our favor and our play. We're well prepared to do it. We've been doing it before they made the announcement of green banks. We were ahead of that curve, so we are well suited to take fully advantage of it, and hopefully that all plays out in our favor. With that, yes, sir.
One more comment. I did want to point out that Chair Chase did help us with a business development opportunity. We had a funder in the city that has been looking at our community impact bond. So we were able to give the board perspective as well and a community perspective as to why it's important. And based on what we heard in the response emails, that was a good touch to have a board member involved and it helped bring a lot of color to what we're trying to do on the impact bond. So just wanted to let the rest of the board know. Chair Chase is out there holding the weight for the organization.
Hopefully it works out. But we'll move on to, there's no other business. Any public comments?
No public comments at this time.
No public comments. And just for my recollection, the date of the next meeting, did we
I'm glad
change
you
that?
mentioned
Yeah.
that while I have you all here. So it appears for the month of December, we want to look at that week of the 11th. I like how we've been stacking our meetings, finance programs in the board, because I think that works out better for you guys. So I'm looking at the 14th or the 15th, or either the 12th. I know that's kind of early, but it would put us ahead of the break, because I know folks go out of town and stuff. Closer we get to Christmas, so. Okay. What about the 14th, guys?
Okay.
It looks good?
I could do 3 and 4,
Okay.
but or we do financial 2, and then it's a 3.
We could do that. Y'all want us to do the 14th and I run all 3 of them?
Let's do 14.
Okay. All right, I'll send these
Seems like that's a
invitations
good
out.
date.
Giselle
Tomorrow.
can't do 3. Yeah. She can only do 4, so it might just be,
But she can't do it ending.
unless if we can
You
get
can do
Steve.
4 o'clock.
We can do 4 o'clock. If we can get
Yeah, yeah.
Steve, yeah.
Okay.
So let's, 4 it'll be the board meeting.
To be here for 4.
Let's do the board meeting, the 14th at 4.
The 14th at 4, and you still wait, you want to do finance and investments on the 14th at 2?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Andrea, would it help if, and Giselle, what about Monday, the 12th for program?
I could do 4 then.
Ms. Banks?
Oh, right, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong date.
Okay.
That's,
4,
thanks, yeah.
it doesn't matter, it's the same. I can do 4.
4 on Monday?
Okay, so we could do wait, can we do finance at 3 on the 14th instead?
Yes.
And we'll move programs to Monday at 12. I mean, the 12th at 4.
So we'll have finance at 3 on the 12th,
On the 14th.
On the
on the
14th.
On
14th.
the 14th.
Okay, and programs will be at 4 on the 12th.
Yep.
Yep, I got it. All right, thank you.
All right. Well, with that.
He won't join the committee until next year.
We do, and just to let you guys know,
Which
we
is
will
soon.
have elections in
All
January.
right.
So that's what we'll do, the committee slates and all of that stuff, okay?
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Then we can have a.
The
Yeah.
only other housekeeping is just for the record, we had 2 trustees that came in, trustee Morris and Thomas.
Thank you.
For the roll call.
For the roll call, yeah, thank you for that. So after that update, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All right, see you all on the
Happy
14th.
Thanksgiving,
Happy
everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving, I know.